5. Anu stepping down from the throne. According to Dr. Borden in his essay, The Link, Chapter 8, Anu announced already decades before the birth of Christ that he was stepping down and needed a successor. This was big news, and the Anunnaki, still here on Earth, more or less left what they were doing and went back home to Nibiru. Enki, the Enki, and Namur, the Enlil, who belonged to different clans, the Serpent clan and the Ram clan, respectively, started lobbying actively and aggressively to promote someone from their own camp as Anu's successor. LPGCS intel is showing that the lobbying was very dramatic. King Anu wanted a bloodless, coup-less succession, announcing he would choose his successor, depending on how well he had performed while on Earth. Enki and Namur were themselves candidates, but considered out of the question for succession due to their performance while down here. Marduk and Nannar were also disqualified due to unlordly behavior. Not sure what unlordly means exactly, but King Anu was the one who authorized the nukes to be dropped over the Sinai spaceport and Sodom and Gomorrah among other things, so I guess that the king is exempted from unlordly behavior. The following is paraphrased from Dr. Borden's above essay, but is sticking quite closely to the original. The reason for this is that the section in question is very important, because it has, in my opinion, a lot to do with how the A.A.M.Is minds work, their imperatives, and how they affect us. From that, we need to make decisions what we want to do. However, I strongly suggest you read the original essay from beginning to end, because we all need to know what is written in there. It can be downloaded for free in my ebooks section. I am paraphrasing from page 54 and on. When King Anu decided to step down, there was a fast and furious Anunnaki exodus from Earth to participate in the lobbying for whatever clan they belonged to. Marduk and Ningishzida, both sons of Enki, and their families left, which had as a consequence that the smelting operations in Bolivia closed down. Enki's son Nergal, his consort, Nannar's daughter Erikigel, and Namur were apparently the first to return to Nibiru, together with King Anu's grandson Ninurta and consort. Members of the Ram clan led by Namur, whom also left, were Nannar and consort Iker, Adad, Inanna, Anan, Nain, and some others. They went to a platform, waiting to be transported back home. Apparently, Nannar and his consort returned to Earth for a short time period, to northern Syria, but then returned to the platform again. The reason being that the Enlil, his father, and King Anu, his grandfather, told them to return to Altiplano of northeastern Peru, in the mid to late 2nd century of the Common Era to help Nannar's son, U2 to close down the smelter at Asacsayhuaman as well as the dismantling of runway operations in the Nazca area of southern Peru. The smelter was still producing gold, tin, and silver from distant and nearby sources from relocated Kassites, southern and central Turkey. The operation stopped before the first millennium of the Common Era. Sometime in the 6th century CE, Sacsayhuaman shut down and the pre-Incan civilizations from northern Peru through the region north of the Atacama Desert in northern Chile were all left to fend for themselves. Other colonies, like North American Midwest, southeastern and southwestern native groups who came in contact with and were instructed by the Anunnaki on agricultural, animal husbandry and other matters, were also disengaged and eventually abandoned in the 7th and 8th century AD. 5.1 Political dramas on the home planet. When all the royal Anunnaki had returned to Nibiru, their usual aggressive traits played out again, and there was a furious contest to bring King Anu's attention. Enki and Namur led their clans, respectively, in order to bring either themselves or someone of their blood to the royal throne. Both Enki or Namur were appointed to serve under something the king now called the Kitchen Cabinet, which was the former Council of 12, but in a slightly watered-down form. Others, appointed were trusted A.A.M.I, many of them familiar to us through these papers I've written, and of course, through Sitchin's books originally. King Anu had many matters on his mind, whereof one was the destruction of the Sinai spaceport around 2500 BC. I am not sure in what sense he was concerned about that, because it was in fact King Anu himself whom approved the nuclear bombings. See previous Anunnaki paper. Another matter, naturally, was the royal succession. However, the most urgent matter was the Marduk issue. Marduk, Ankur's son and the king's grandson, still held grudges after all these thousands of years, thinking he should be the king of Nibiru and the king of Earth at the same time. It showed that when Marduk returned to Nibiru with the rest of the Anunnaki crew, most of them strongly supported him in his mission. Of the approximately 400 Anunnaki who left Earth to come back to Nibiru, around 300 of them supported Marduk. Apparently, at some time after they all had returned home there was some kind of severe confrontation between the Ram and the Serpent clan, although it is not clear to what extent. Dr. Borden and LPGC got this intel from AA.A.M.I, who spoke up during annual meetings with the Alien Link group, apparently when forced to do so by the rest of the members, not only humans. This conflict, however, turned out favorable to a candidate, who was not on the king's list, Nannar, the Enlil's son. Marduk was already out of the question for succession, because King Anu had created a new, firm policy that everybody had to swear loyalty to the king, personally, and to the kingdom. No one was excluded from this new policy. Marduk and his followers, in particular, were furious over this, because he would never swear loyalty to the king, nor the kingdom. He had other plans. Also, around 2025 BC, with the new zodiacal era, the A.A.M.I/Anunnaki were very much into astrology. Marduk falsified the astrological charts to his favor, so he could quicker come to power on Earth, and he also took on the task to rewrite Earth history, especially the early history, how humans came about, when that happened and when the Anunnaki came down. He also wanted to make sure that he was considered the only god in authority, so he put himself in charge of all occult and secret societies and rewrote their manuals as well and claimed the highest, hidden authority over them all. This way, he has access to all information and intel, and thus full control over a big chunk of humanity. In addition, Marduk was also attempting to construct a 6-stage ziggurat strong enough to support a landing platform at its apex. This is currently underway in Iraq. Despite all these things, talking against Marduk, and for him being a potential dangerous rebel in the eyes of the king and the kingdom, his father Ankur, the Enki, did all he could to support and shield his firstborn son. Ankur, sitting on the Council of 12, as well as his half-brother Namur, made things a little tense to say the least. Through internal familial politicking, Marduk managed to get Ningishzida ousted and exiled to the New World first, in particular the American Southwest, Mexico and the highlands of Peru and Bolivia, and then to the Far East, where he met and worked with U2 in Japan, coastal China, the Korean Peninsula, and the Asian highlands of Nepal and Tibet on tasks and projects with natives not disclosed to LPGC. What we do see, however, is the enormous global influence this Anunnaki group has had on humankind. Ningishzida also became Quetzalcoatl in Mexico, often, but not always, depicted in reptilian form. Now, when Marduk refused to obey to the rules, he was said to have been put in the equivalent of quarantine, common in A.A.M.I culture under such circumstances when comes to lords, they told. This did not stop him, however, and he continued to refuse to show obedience to any and all important laws and regulations of the A.A.M.I kingdom. This put both his father and grandfather in a position where the king had no other choice than to expel Marduk and tell him to leave and go back to Earth, to never be able to return again to the planet of his birth. From what LPGC has been told, Marduk returned to Earth with about 300 loyalists around the turn of the first millennium of the Common Era, 1000 AD. Interesting here is that it is now officially admitted by the A.A.M.I people that Marduk rewrote at least part of our history, but we are not told exactly what he rewrote. It's too hard to speculate on it, because it can't be more than that speculations, but there are some significant point made by metaphysical sources, the Pleiadians, the Ra material, Lissa Royal's channeling, Asha Yanadine, the wing makers, the list goes on, that we humans were highly evolved beings before the Anunnaki came and chased away the creator gods, who were building the living library. It was when the Anunnaki started tampering with our DNA to create obedient, but not too smart, workers that the problem started. We can read about the Anunnaki history on Earth through the Sumerian cuneiform texts, but there is no real history about what happened before these creator gods came. If it wasn't for the metaphysical entities, who have told us what happened before the intruders came, we wouldn't know anything about the living library and previous creator gods. Dr. Borden is saying something quite remarkable in his essay in relation to that Marduk and his followers returned to Earth. Anu had a very hard time choosing his successor, having to be very careful whom he chose, not to create political consequences way beyond his own death. Dr. Borden continues, it would split both the people and the bio-mind. Such an act would carve out a huge chunk of A.A.M.I. Kalyumdi all end is end life, that of being one power. This, we were told, is the power of the entire A.A.M.I. population to act as one, like a single degree of freedom organism, under certain circumstances. I find this quote quite informative, as it indicates to me that this is not freedom, but some kind of effort of the A.A.M.I. leadership to get their population under control under the guise of being one. Becoming one is nothing that can be forced on someone by rules and regulations, it's a personal thing. It also has nothing to do with nanotechnology or any other technology either, for that matter. And moreover, the king of Nibiru has his people swear total obedience to the kingdom or be expelled, which is not power of choice, free will or freedom at all, it's dictatorship. Haven't we had enough of that? 5.2 The New King and the Second Coming. Sometime in the 1400s AD, the old King Anu stepped down, after finally had made a decision he was proud of. His successor would be one of the most unexpected of them all, Nannar, son of Namur, the Enlil. He was a big part of the Earth history, also known under the name Sin. Circumstances of which former King Anu hadn't taken into consideration made him make this decision, with the help of Ningishzida, who was the one coming with the suggestion. Ningishzida said he was certain that Nannar was perhaps the only one who could unite the people again, and that he also had the life force similar to Anu. Besides, he had been quite popular among the Earthlings, allegedly. This was quite an unusual gesture, because Ningishzida was the son of Ankur, the Enki, and Nannar was of the opposing clan. Anu saw the brilliance in this choice, according to the intel LPGC have gathered, and he soon made his decision official. Nannar was now the new king of Nibiru and the A.A.M.I. people and is up to this day. Marduk, who was expelled from his original world, has been a major player in Earth's history over the last millennium. He and his 300 or so Anunnaki followers have controlled major organizations, institutions, governments, political parties, religions, educational systems, entertainment, and not the least, secret societies from behind the scenes, and it's not been in our favor, that is just the fact. However, as Borden is also quick to point out, he is one of the big players, but not the only player. There are more ET races and bands of ET races, physical and non-physical, who have dominated mankind for a long time, some of them side by side, and in opposition to Marduk. The fight for power has been an endless drama throughout history, and it has not only been between factions of Anunnaki that would have been bad enough, but there are more which we shall go into in other papers. But keep in mind that the Anunnaki is a widespread term, and we know today that they work together with both the Greys and the Reptilians, and some other races as well, which we shall reveal with time. 6. We don't need no Anunnaki, we don't need no thought control. It's not an easy situation for us here on Earth. The living library is desirable real estate, and it's been fought over since it was created, perhaps a billion years ago, or more, by the original creator gods. The question is, what should we do? I have had a flood of communication going back and forth between me and Dr. A.R. Borden, as a representative both for himself and LPGC, being one of the founding scientists. Borden was himself abducted by the A.A.M.I. on more than one occasion in his youth, however, not always unwillingly so. Just like I feel that I have things I need to do both for my own sake and that of others on this planet who are willing to feel out my thoughts, so does Dr. Borden. LPGC have been taking on the role of self-appointed ambassadors for Earth in the absence of unity amongst mankind. They felt the situation was urgent and decided to speak on our behalf. Some would argue that we don't need ambassadors in the first place. The truth is, they don't. And they know it. Still, due to the circumstances, it seems like they were left with little choice in the matter. Life happens all around us and above and below us every day, and if we all were aware of what's going on in exopolitics and among off-world species in relation to ourselves and our planet, we would be able to consult our ambassadors, and they us, and everything would be easier, not the least for them who have to be our consciousness. Knowing what they know, they feel they need to act in one way or the other. I think it's a little more complicated than that, though. For reasons I can't go into at this point, I have seen indicators of that. At least Dr. Borden made an agreement with the A.A.M.I. more than once in Sitter Space to start LPGC and continue the mission he is now on, a mission we still don't know enough about. Apparently, what is being discussed and planned in the link meetings with what Borden calls the plenum, the human and off-world non-government representative of the different member species, both active and spectator groups, is, that first of all, we humans have to show what our true imperatives are as a species, and not only what is suggested by a representative group like LPGC, who does not officially have the backup from the people. If approximately 3% of humankind can come together and present some common imperatives, the plenum will listen and accept this for the record. However, if we keep being scattered, ignorant, and non-caring in general, no one will take us seriously, and the real estate called Earth is for anyone to grab. This planet will not be considered ours, as little as we would consider birds or cats being in charge of our planet. There are quite a few things that bother me with the above reasoning. In summary, 1A.A.M.E/Nibiru year is about 3,600 Earth years, 1R, and these beings live a very, very long time, in our terms. IR is nothing for them. To me it's quite astonishing if King Nannar has managed to unite his people since the 1400s, which is in no time, from their point of view. The internal conflicts and civil unrest amongst the A.A.M.I. people have been an ongoing saga for millions, perhaps billions, of Earth years, so it sounds to me most unlikely. The conflicts and separateness were still very much major factors just before Nannar became king, as described earlier in this paper. If, after all, Nannar really has managed to unite people, it's only because he's used technology to do so. Loyalty to the kingdom is a must for the A.A.M.I. people to be accepted, as we already know, and this alone doesn't seem like a true unification to me, more like an enforced one. Someone is making the rules, and the rest are forced to follow, and when they do, it's called oneness. Why would we, or anybody, trust them? They have showed over and over again that they are a very immoral, combating warrior race, obsessed with sex and power. To believe that they should have changed so drastically so suddenly is naive to me. Let's pretend that the new king actually is serious when comes to helping us stand on our own feet. Still, we would have to trust that this skeleton crew, yet another crew left on their own here on Earth, just like in the past, is as united as they want us to believe and not start fighting internally again. To me, it sounds like the odds that history will repeat itself are pretty big. I can understand that LPGC feel that they are backed into a corner, and that we actually don't have a choice in the matter. According to members of the plenum, there are two major achievements we as a species need to accomplish. We need to have a 3% unity, able to present the imperatives of the human race. We need to decide whether we can stand on our own feet or need help to do so. If we are to take this seriously, these are enormous goals to achieve. When we look around, we see how ignorant people are around us, and few would take something like this seriously at this point. When I discuss some of these issues with Dr. Borden, he agrees with me that we are still not sure if being supervised by a Nibiruan crew would be in our best interest, but it's one option. It's not up to LPGC to decide. Our first goal is to make enough people aware of our challenges, not only those with the Nibiruans, and from there decide what kind of future we want, says Borden. One thing seems certain, as the information is drawn from many different sources, obviously separate from each other, the A.A.M.I are coming back, and not everybody thinks that's a good thing. Some say they are coming back now because we are evolving into higher frequencies and dimensions, and they are not. Therefore, they come back to feed off our emotions once again, emotions being food for them, and it depletes us from ours, like vampires sucking your life force. They have forgotten who their own creator gods are, and that they are not the top of the totem pole. We have also from reliable metaphysical sources that master geneticists, like the Anunnaki, are capable of occupying many different forms, either meaning they are shapeshifters of sorts, Marciniac, or that they themselves have tampered with their own genetics to the extent that they have changed forms. The Pleiadians are emphasizing that these beings are shapeshifters and interdimensional, and some of them are reptilians while others are not, and this was before Ik started saying the same thing. If this is all true, the returning gods are certainly bad news. Barbara Marciniak, channeling the Pleiadians, continues in her excellent book, Bringers of the Dawn. When these beings Anunnaki, or the Lizzies as the Pleiadians used to call them, return to Earth, there will be many of you who will turn to them and say, yes, these are wonderful gods. I feel wonderful about them. They are so magnificent. Look what they can do. Some of these gods will seem to fix and save your world. This is where it will be easy to miss the bigger picture. It will look as if they are coming to fix and save your world when, in actuality, what they are doing is simply creating another form of authority and control, emphasis not an original. What we are saying is that people will put a belief system and a paradigm on these entities. There will be a large marketing program to sell the presence of these entities to you. This program is already going on. Note that the above was channeled already in 1992. With all the intel I've gathered, and the material available on this subject that I have taken part of, where some is pro-Anunnaki returning, others are against, and some are indecisive about it, I can't help but coming to a very similar conclusion as the Pleiadians did 19 years ago. They knew what were coming down the pipes, and there is indeed a great promotion for the returning of the gods, and many are working behind the scenes to help them, such as the German, British, American, and Swiss Thule Order, described in details in my previous ebook, The Myth Around Supreme David Rockefeller. They are working on opening stargates on our end to let some of these gods through. Others are working on this, perhaps unbeknownst of what is coming down the line, and LPGC may be one of these organizations. If they think they can be ambassadors for the gods once they have cleansed our planet, I'm afraid they are up for a surprise. Still, the gods would not have as much of a chance to establish a new kingdom here on Earth without help from our brightest minds. But even our most brilliant people can be deceived. It sounds to me that the return of the gods is just a carefully planned takeover of our planet. It's time for the changing of the guards, and once again, these beings want to rule in the open instead of behind the scenes. If you haven't already, read my Anunnaki papers, and especially paper number 5, Abraham, Moses, and the Chosen People. If that doesn't support that the Anunnaki are feeding off our emotions, I don't know what would. The Enlil, here in the form of YHVH, shows off as the cold-blooded murderer he was, and while telling his chosen people not to kill in his 10 commandments, he afterwards ordered them to kill thousands of people who did not obey the Anunnaki god. YHVH himself killed hundreds of thousands of people in the name of worship and religion. Afterwards, he must have felt well fed, thanks to ignorant human beings, who gladly went into his trap and obeyed his insane orders unconditionally. Many who read this paper will find they come to the same conclusions as I do, and it's important that we exclude the return of the gods from our possible future. We need to get together and raise our vibrations, become more like light beings and become unconditional love. We have to set our imperatives, and those imperatives do not include the Anunnaki ruling us in fear and terror for at least another 26,000 years, when we get a new chance to evolve in the sense we do now. That's when the solar system align with the galactic center in this fashion next time. But the best chance to break what Neil Freer calls the God's spell is now, at this very moment in time, and we are running late. See my solution papers for more details. We need to become sovereign and not depend on gods, aliens, governments, and whatnot for decision making. We are our own gods, and though we are considered being at the bottom of the totem pole in terms of cosmic intelligence and technical advancement, we have something few other biokins have: a wide range of emotions and RNA/DNA from many different, highly spiritually evolved beings, who created us before the Anunnaki came down. We have a lot of power of our own, and we are knocking on the multidimensional doors right now. Previously they were closed, because we didn't even know which doors to knock on, but now more and more people have found them. We knock gently and reluctantly at first, and the doors open just a little bit, but now we are beginning to gain more certainly and knock harder. And lo and behold, the doors fly open and our connection to the multidimensional existence happens quickly and surely. We are finding that the multiverse is not out there, but within ourselves, and that revelation alone is freeing us from our vibrational prison. We were talking about Marduk changing the records of their own history on Earth, and I asked the rhetorical question, what exactly did he change? First of all, I think Marduk was not the only one of the Anunnaki who changed history. History, as they say, is written, or told, by the winners, and there were many winners and losers in the endless battles the gods fought against each other. Being full of themselves, I'm sure they told their workers, Homo sapiens sapiens, their version of history. I believe that the most blatant lie they told the Sumerian people was that we are coming from apes with low intelligence and primitive lifestyle, and that the Anunnaki sped up the process by manipulating our RNA/DNA. Now the A.A.M.I. are using their triumph card, that they were the ones creating us, or rather upgraded us from apes to Homo sapiens sapiens, and hence sped up our evolution with millions of years. So in other words, we should be grateful to them and forgive them for what was done to us in the past. Every cell in my body tells me this is wrong. But why would we believe channeled, metaphysical sources, then? Well, once we've felt them out and understand why they are here, and have checked their credibility, not all of them are here in the best of our interests. These entities, who have the ability to read our energy fields and that of the planet, can see our past the way it really happened on our current common timeline, and in addition, many of these sources were part of the creation and thus have first-hand experiences with our planet. Some of them are even us in the future, so they are speaking of theirs and ours pasts, respectively, but from a multidimensional viewpoint. I consider these sources pretty reliable. Still, that's not what's most important, but what do you feel inside to be the truth and what does not sit well with you? Trust your inner self. Something I have not been able to prove at this point is the theory I have that Marduk's clan and the A.A.M.I. on the home planet are basically on the same side, and it's just a game to fool us humans into taking sides in a battle where the winner is the same, no matter which side wins. We have been suppressed for so long now that people start seeing through the oppression and they are waking up from their sleep. The A.A.M.I. always knew this would happen, and not to lose their real estate they had to put on a little show, starting with creating prophecy. We have to remember that these people think long thoughts, and a few 10,000 years of thinking ahead is nothing for them, like it would be for us thinking a month ahead. Now, when we wake up, one by one, two by two, they come down from the heavens pretending to be on our side. They will turn man against man, possibly in the most devastating war we've ever seen, the Battle of Armageddon, using weapons of mass destruction that are not even imagined yet in the SF literature. The outcome will be a vastly reduced population which can easily be managed by a skeleton crew and the reptilian gatekeepers. So in reality, Marduk and the home planet are siding with each other, turning man against man. Sounds unlikely? Not if we look at the history of these people. We think we know who they are, and particularly, how they are. These people have erased our memories of them, most probably more than once. Listen to this. The original planners, the Vegans and the Lyrans, inserted a source code into our DNA that is activating now, see previous papers. Over time, the A.A.M.I/Anunnaki, while doing their genetic experiments on us, found out that this source code exists and will wake humanity up in the near future, from their time perspective, or maybe they knew from the beginning, although not likely, as they may have kidnapped Lyrans to get the secret out of them, perhaps through torture. There is always a chance they knew the Lyrans wouldn't speak no matter what torture they used. Or even more likely, the A.A.M.I. didn't find out about the source code until the Lyrans had left. Now the A.A.M.I. desperately try to find it, and so do the faction of the Greys who are abducting humans, but can't. The original planners knew they hid it well enough so that it couldn't be found by any intruders. Instead of attempting to find something which is more or less impossible to find, they decide to make sure humankind remains as distracted as possible during the nanosecond, 1987 to 2012, so most people stay asleep. They understand that it may not be possible to stop some of us from ascending, but that may be an acceptable loss to them. Their problem is the population of 7 billion people. I'm sure the reptilian gatekeepers and the earthbound Anunnaki have had a hard time keeping us in check sometimes. The answer for them is always war. So why not create a war greater than any before to reduce the human population down to 500 million, which has been the plan for so long. It's not happened yet because the A.A.M.I. are supposed to take care of that part. And the global elite have probably been promised to be spared in the Armageddon battle. After all, it's the A.A.M.I. and their reptilian cohorts who are feeding them. If we think about it, why would Anu, the former A.A.M.I. king, all of a sudden get an epiphany about that he should turn Earth over to the humans and then leave someone with Marduk's mindset here to rule on Earth with an iron fist for a few thousand years? Additionally, they destroy a big chunk of our planet by nuking Sodom, Gomorrah, and other cities, plus the Sinai spaceport, making the area highly radioactive up until this day, mercilessly killing the humans they just said should own the planet, and as destructively as possible, many of them leave. Where's the compassion in that? Isn't it more likely that they left Marduk here because they knew he would rule us with an iron fist, and that's exactly what they wanted? To keep humanity oppressed and obedient while the rest of the A.A.M.I. were gone, doing business elsewhere? And in the middle of everything, the reptilians are helping Marduk, maybe from bases on the moon and other planetary bodies in the solar system. Yes, Marduk may have been rebellious towards the kingdom since young age and felt mistreated, but how loyal/disloyal is he when it comes down to it? Ronald Reagan and others have said that in case of an invasion from outer space, humanity would finally be united in a global effort to defeat them. Yes, that is what we are getting prepared for. Thus, when 7 to 9 feet tall humanoids, together with demon-like reptilians and other strange creature, as if directly taken from the Bible, which they are in certain terms, come down in spaceships, most people will side with the governments, on which Marduk's clan is pulling the strings. Of course, people don't know how this is orchestrated, and a devastating world war will take place where man fights against man, gods fight against man, and man fights against gods. Others, who think they've seen through it, will join with the incoming, but it doesn't matter, because they are one and the same. It's just a big deception. When it's all over, the A.A.M.I. has won and the remaining humanity is now at their mercy. The A.A.M.I. species is a conquer race. Why would they voluntarily give up real estate they once won in battle? They have conquered other worlds as well, according to LPGC and many metaphysical sources as well. It would be interesting to see how they manage those worlds and look for similarities. These were just my thoughts on this subject, but let's go on and relay the story LPGC and the A.A.M.I. themselves are telling us. The above concerns raise even more questions, and I'm sure that you, the reader, have a few as well. We will continue this discussion in much more details in the solution papers, but at least the cards are on the table, and we have no choice but go from here.